Strictly speaking, perjury as well, because a breach of an oath is considered to be an offence of perjury, because there are two sorts of oath. There's the declaratory oath, which a witness swears, I declare I saw this happen on the 15th, and there's the promissory oath, which an official swears. So, if an official breaches his oath, it's regarded as perjury on the day that he took it.
So Baroness Ashton is automatically guilty?
Indeed. Well, any MP or member of the Privy Council that becomes a European Commissioner is automatically a traitor as well. I think it goes without saying, doesn't it?
I've just had the wording sent to me in answer to a letter to the Home Secretary.
Yes, yeah. I mean, if you want to talk about oaths, that's another pet topic of mine. Let's start me off. But we'll go on about the weapons. So a similar thing happened with the Firearms Act. So I've got to tell you. The first Firearms Act came about in 1920. Now, the significance of 1920 is there's recently been a war, haven't there? Yeah. So-called Great War. In order to prosecute the war, there had been an Act of Parliament passed, the Defence of the Realm Act 1915, put the country on a war footing, because the powers that be repeatedly used as an emergency. Problem reaction solution? Yeah. They knew about it in 1915. I didn't until 10 years ago. It's embarrassing. But problem reaction solution, there's a war on, these crowds are coming our way, what should we do? Take away your liberties. So it had a 5-year shelf life. It was due to expire in 1920. So the situation in 1920 is, and 1919, apparently there was a event for returned servicemen in Hyde Park, and many thousand returned servicemen attended. The king of the day, I forget the numbers mixed up, Edward something or other, came out on his horse with 1919. George V. Came out of the palace with one of those hats with a chicken on his head, whatever they're called. You know what I mean? And the crowd surged towards him. And he thought they were out to get him, because bear in mind, his cousin, the Tsar of Russia, had recently been topped, hadn't he? He thought the revolution happened, so the king fled back to the palace, slammed the gates, got on the blows to the Home Secretary. What are we going to do about all these returned ex-servicemen? A committee was formed, the Blackwell Committee, whose minutes have now been released under the 70-year rule, and of course they were concerned about Bolshevism in Liverpool particularly. Something must be done. The first thing they did, in actual fact, was pass the Police Act 1919, because in 1919 the police go on strike in London and Liverpool. Disorder broke out in 20 minutes in Liverpool and 30 minutes in the East End. Something had to be done, and the Police Act was passed, and it suppressed the police union. Now, interestingly enough, I used to be a Federation rep. You never guessed, would you, Bolshe? There isn't a union in the police, but there is a federation. This is the reason for it, and you're elected for 3 years. I did it for 6, and I used to. I had too many children at that stage, and I kept getting phone calls in the night. I got told not to, but by her indoors. So the reason for the Police Act 1919 was to suppress the police union. Now, it was the first time a union had been suppressed, and the reason is, I don't think there's any trade unionists here. A trade union is exercises certain fundamental rights of the subject: freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and right to petition. Petition means complain, doesn't it? And there were various attempts to suppress unions during the Victorian period, but it didn't work because they successfully upheld the common law. However, 1919, of course, because of the Defence of the Realm Act, the Constitution suspended because of an emergency. So the Police Act was passed, and they invented the Federation. And the Federation, in actual fact, has never seriously bothered the powers that be. The only known occasion was in the early 70s. Was at the Federation conference at Blackpool or some such place, and a serving policeman jumped onto the Home Secretary's car and held the windscreen wipers for about 2 minutes, and that was a big scandal. That was the worst they ever did. He was protesting about something. They've never seriously bothered the powers that be, because at the top of it you'll find they're Freemasons. So there we are. So that's the Prevention of Crime Act. The Firearms Act also was passed through at the same time, and the purpose of the Firearms Act was to disarm the population. And the reason for that is there are no laws relating to firearms. In fact, people actually carry weapons regularly. An example of that, although it's a couple of years later, is if you want to study what was common knowledge and common practice in a period in history, newspapers and history books aren't really the best source because they record the unusual. Novels and writings are.
Sherlock Holmes.
Yes, Sherlock Holmes. Yeah, exactly what I was going to quote. Dr. Watson, have you got your revolver? Oh yes, yeah, that's right. Daphne du Maurier. Any Daphne du Maurier fans? She lived in a remote place in Exmoor or Dartmoor, and one evening in 1923 she had a dinner party, and she said, "How many people have got revolvers?" And, "Oh, I've got one." "You've got one." And of course, crime was low, strangely enough. So the Firearms Act was rushed through, and the reason it was rushed through was to disarm these returned ex-servicemen. Because something I need to mention is that captured German weapons, rifles up to artillery pieces, were given to people who bought war bonds. So there are a large number of weapons knocking around, and there still will be in office and that sort of thing. They say in country districts, it's not uncommon to find pikes in old straw roofs, but because that's where you kept the pike, because it was warm and dry, and that sort of thing. So, and these weapons do turn up in amnesties. They have amnesties from time to time. So the Firearms Act 1920 was passed, and the other incentive for the Firearms Act 1920 was the League of Nations. The League of Nations wanted to form one more government. How do you form one government, one army? How do you eliminate resistance?
Disarm
the population. So the purpose of the Firearms Act 1920. What was it sold as? What were the population told the purpose of the Firearms Act 1920 was? Crime, because there were 6 armed robberies per year in London.
Terrorists.
Oh, terrorists, yes, the Red Hand Gang and that sort of thing, yeah.
Nothing changes, huh?
Yeah, nothing changes. In actual fact, there's a thing you might want to look up called the Tottenham Outrage. So it's 1903, I believe, and foreign terrorists, Serbians, they've been holed up in England, they've run out of money, so they have to come out finding to do an armed robbery. So they rob a bank, and they flee on a bus, they commandeer a bus, and they're pursued by the local constabulary, some on horses, some on bicycles, and several hundred shots were fired, exchanged between the 3 terrorists on the bus and who? Members of the public. Members of the public, yeah. So, and it was called the Tottenham Outrage, not because the shooting was an issue, it's because somebody actually did an armed robbery, which increased it to 7 per year. So you might want to look up the Tottenham Outrage. And in actual fact, when I joined the police, there was an issue of what to do with an event you're confronted with a man with a gun, and the textbook answer was, you go door to door until you find somebody that's got a gun, and you commandor the gun, and him and his other gun, and you go and sort the problem out. And that's how it was done. Now, we've recently had Cumbria, haven't we? We've had that moat creature running riot. And what did the police do in those circumstances? What did they do? Keep well away. Yes, hide. Yes, hide around the corner. Yes. Oh, health and safety. Sorry. You know. And how things have changed, haven't they? You know, that's living memory. And again, that's another issue that needs to be put right. But I've got a list. It's got names on it too. So, okay. So to answer your question, that's what happens right there. Now, if you were to apply for a firearms certificate for a weapon covered by a firearms certificate for self-defence, what would happen? You wouldn't get one. And why do you need one if you have a right to bear arms? Exactly, and that is the next stage.
Is that proscribing it for one of our rights?
Well, that's the next stage. Well, what would happen is if you were to apply, you get a letter back from the Chief Counsel who issues firearms certificates, and it says, it's been Home Office policy for many years to discourage the issue of firearms certificates for self-defence because we think it will cause more disorder. You're not having one. Okay? So it's a policy. It was last reissued in 2002. It was secret between 1969 and 1988. And it was first promulgated by none other than Roy Jenkins, who was Home Secretary. What do we know about Roy Jenkins? Traitor. Yes, that's right. Yeah. There is an issue about the validity of an Act of Parliament if it's been obtained by traitorous or dishonest means, isn't it? So the Firearms Act said 1968 is certainly an issue.
And the European Communities Act?
Just the same, isn't it? Yeah. Mr. Heath. Good old Albert Burgess as well, up to speed on that one, isn't he?
John Bingley as well?
Yes, yeah. Well, John Bingley is one of my associates. In fact, I won't say I taught him all I know, but I started him off. I'll tell you that story. As a serving policeman, I obviously can't get involved in politics, which is only fair. Wouldn't wish to. However, I've got to uphold the law, haven't I? Because I've taken the oath. So that's the route I went down. So history repeats itself. Now, I'm aware of the Bill of Rights, which is a statute in force, isn't it? How do you tell whether a statute is enforced, an Act of Parliament is enforced? Remember HMSO? It used to be if Her Majesty's Stationery Office published it in the form of a little booklet, it was a statute in force. That was the test.